talking about taking your TAing online, which is an interest for me as a TA, especially. And I hope you guys can all take a few things away to put into your own work and your teaching. So as Jill mentioned, I am a graduate teaching associate here with the Center for Teaching and Learning, and over the last year, I've learned a lot about teaching and had some great mentors in the center, like Jill. But I also teach as a TA in the Faculty of Health as a PhD student, and I've been teaching or teaching assistant for human sexuality, which is a very large class. Although it's not technically an online course, we do a lot of online work. We use a program called Top Hat extensively in the course, which is an online platform. And we use this platform as a way to engage students in the class itself, but they also have their course text online. So they do all of their homework and assignments online. As well as in the last semesters, we took the exams online too. So we have some experience with doing online exams. Even though the students are in the classroom doing it, they're doing the exams online. So that's pretty cool. So with the current situation relating to the pandemic, we know that many TAs may be moving their work online for the very first time. This was one of the reasons and the goal for doing this workshop is to provide some insights into being a TA online and hopefully some tangible tips that you can take back and incorporate into your work and your teaching. With that being said, I thought we would start the workshop with a question or two. So I've put those up on this slide. So what do you think are the challenges of being a TA online, and or what are your concerns about being a TA that's teaching exclusively online? So you can answer one or both of those questions using the chat function, and I'll give you a few minutes to type in some responses, and then we can see what you guys have concerns about. Will I be able to build rapport with students? That's a great question and concern. And we will talk about some of that today too. Brianna is asking, will my students feel comfortable approaching me with questions? Another great question. And yeah, hopefully we'll talk about that too in terms of building rapport with students too. And hopefully that will, by building rapport, you'll also build comfort that the students can ask you things. Engaging students in interesting ways. Yeah, we'll look at some ways to hopefully spice up TAing online. Answering the same question for each student can, yes, certainly take a long time. So maybe can share some tips on how to be efficient or insights into that. The absence of nonverbal body language. I am feeling that right now as I am looking at my slide and not seeing any smiling faces back at me. So yeah, we will talk a little bit about how you can kind of stimulate interest and engagement for students. Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. So those are some great questions. And as we go along, feel free to put more up. And if you have any comments, please share. So I thought we'd move along with the workshop and hopefully address some of those concerns. And I thought we'd start with some background information. And I think it's important to distinguish between the two types of online learning that you can do. There's the synchronous learning and the asynchronous learning. And the type that is used in your classroom can have a huge impact on your online education experience. While online education continues to grow in popularity and accessibility, it can still be grouped broadly into these two categories. So synchronous learning is online education that happens in real time, kind of like what we're doing right now. You had the appointed time, you came into the session, and here I am live for your entertainment and learning. Whereas synchronous learning, it occurs through online channels without real-time interaction. There are hybrid learning methods that will include a blend of synchronous and asynchronous learning, and that might be something that you find works for you. Models which use strictly synchronous or asynchronous approaches will have distinctly different features that will determine how you work in your teaching responsibilities. So briefly, we can just explore some of the advantages and disadvantages of each type, starting with synchronous learning. So the advantages include classroom engagement, dynamic learning, and instructional depth. So these are some of the concerns that you brought to the chat function in that first question. How do you engage students? So if your students enjoy active discussion, immediate feedback with a personal familiarity, you can get that through real-time interaction through the synchronous learning approach. This is especially important distinction if you're just making the transition from the traditional classroom to an online setting. The personal contact that you get through live video conferencing, lecture broadcasts, or messenger chatting can make it a lot easier to make that transitioning from in-class to online. Essentially, you can have all the personal engagement of a classroom while adhering to our social distancing guidelines within this pandemic. Synchronous learning, however, comes with more than just engagement. There's a case to be made that synchronous online learning is a superior way to learn, that it allows for a more dynamic exploration of topics, ideas, and concepts that is impossible in a medium with time lag. So video conferencing, for example, makes it possible to ask questions and answers. You can drive conversations into unexpected new directions. There's a speed and immediacy to synchronous online learning that at its very best can invoke the same level of accountability and engagement at the classroom. Students can also interact regularly and frequently with professors and with you as a TA. You'll get to actually know your students, and this is just not a good way to confirm, or it's not, sorry, this is not just a good way to confirm your credibility. It also provides regular opportunity for face-to-face discussion, individual guidance, and perhaps even the chance to build a relationship with your students, and as someone mentioned earlier, to build rapport with them. So what are some of the disadvantages of synchronous learning? That's probably your next question. So they do have rigid schedules. So we started, for example, today at 1 o'clock. If you're coming in late, I mean, that's great, but we started at 1, so you might have missed 10 minutes or so. And that may present some students with some challenges. The defining characteristics of synchronous learning is its adherence to a set schedule. Lectures and class discussions will take place at established meeting times. If your students have irregular hours, are in different time zones, have parenting responsibilities, or work as essential workers, they may have a hard time satisfying your course requirements. And another challenge of synchronous learning is technical difficulties like spotty internet connections, crashing hard drives, batteries dying. They can become an inconvenience, or they can become a disaster if you have students, feeling a time crunch, and instead of logging on to their course, they're sitting with an exam and not being able to access it. So asynchronous learning also has some advantages. It happens on the schedule of the student. So the instructor provides materials for reading, lectures for viewing, assignments for completing, and exams for evaluation. The student has the ability to access and satisfy these requirements within a flexible time frame. Methods of asynchronous learning may include self-guided lesson modules, streaming video content like YouTube videos, virtual libraries, post-lecture notes, and exchanges across discussion boards or social media platforms. So flexibility is a major advantage of asynchronous learning. Learning will typically evolve around materials that can be accessed on the student's time, and you can set a reasonable time frame. So maybe they complete things in 1 or 2 weeks. They can listen to a lecture on headphones when their baby is napping, or they could take naps themselves, after rewatching Baby Yoda on Star Wars, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because, that's what you have to do. This also gives you as the TA more flexibility too in your schedule. So one of the most powerful features of asynchronous learning is the fact that the experience is typically self-guided. The pacing of the learning is set by the student without great deadline pressures. If they are quick learners, they can choose to power through materials and units that come easier to them. If they need a little bit more time, they have that time to absorb new information and knowledge, take notes, review information, and practice the questions at their pace. In terms of disadvantages, asynchronous learning can be a little bit of a lonely experience. I did a course like this in my undergrad, and it was great that I could really do a lot of the coursework at my own time, and I was able to condense it instead of 13, 14 weeks into a few weeks, but it was kind of lonely because I didn't know any of the classmates, and the instructor was sort of out there in the world. It was just an email that you sent things to. Social media and email simply cannot deliver the same kind of intellectual energy as real-time interactions. The atmosphere is less a collaborative one. The opportunities to interface with, debate, and network with classmates are scarcer in this type of learning. While working in a self-guided environment may be empowering to some students, other students may benefit best from clearly stated expectations, immediate feedback, and to an extent, a watchful eye. The free-form nature of asynchronous learning can be demotivating to those type of students. So that's kind of like the quick rundown on kind of the different types of learning that you may, as a TA, come across in your classes. So as a TA, you may not have great input or a lot of say on the type of learning in your class. Like that might be something the faculty will decide in using, but it's still worthwhile to consider things that may impact your experience and the experiences of your students. You can talk to your faculty member about some of those things and you can try to plan ahead and perhaps troubleshoot some of those items. So this is on this slide is a list of questions that you can ask yourself or talk with your faculty member about to kind of plan ahead. So, have they considered how your students learned online before? Are you considering your students, are they in different time zones? What is the access of your students to technologies and the internet? How can you include different ways for them to learn? Have you tried things out before the students to see if they work? Like, have you played the video that you put up? Have you checked the YouTube link, that sort of thing? Do you know who students can access for technical help? Thinking about these things will make your life easier in advance and will help you help your students during the course. So this is your first tangible tip, a little quotation, air quotations there. So send a survey to your students at the start of the course. Ask them some of the questions from the previous slide to get a sense of their situations, and if there may be any students that may struggle with the learning style of the course. And maybe you can make a note that, I have these 5 students are, in a 12-hour time zone lag or things like that. So you might want to keep a list of students on your radar that have special circumstances that make it more challenging for them to be in your class. And tangible tip number 2, don't forget to give the contact information of technology services to students in case they need IT support. So for example, I'll just give you a personal example from mine. In our course with the Top Hat platform, students a lot of time have difficulties, technical difficulties with their accounts, especially at the start of the semester when they're starting up their accounts. And oftentimes I can't answer these questions myself because I'm sometimes not able to because I don't have access to their accounts like Top Hat does. And other times I'm just not technically capable of it because the technology is kind of outside my wheelhouse of experience or my expertise. But I do know how to contact Top Hat for help. And that's the information that you need to be able to provide your students with so that they can reach out for IT help and support. I would also maybe suggest that you ask your students to follow up with you, like if they email you with a technical support question that you can't answer, in not just giving them the email of IT, but ask them to follow up with you so that you know that they have had the help that they needed and that the problem has been solved. And it's not like 3 weeks into the course and they're still struggling with IT to get this thing sorted out. Because you don't want them to go through half the semester struggling with something that should have been sorted out in the first week or so. Okay, so now comes the fun part, hopefully for you guys. Let's do a poll. So we're going to try to use some of this technology that we have here to engage you. So based upon what we kind of covered so far about synchronous and asynchronous learning, what type of learning do you prefer? And you can pick out of the poll option 1 for synchronous or 2 for asynchronous. And then if you really feel like it, you can maybe type in your chat why you prefer the answer that you've chosen. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. And just give a shout out to Jill who created this poll for me. Thank you very much. And yeah, go for it. Full-time postdoc and mummy. Yes, I can imagine. You never sleep and are always multitasking, Megan. Oh, that's a great comment. Wendy, as a learner, you prefer synchronous so you can ask questions soon, and as a TA, asynchronous so that you have more time to prepare. Yeah, so that's great. Maybe you can do a hybrid. Oh, the results are in. I feel like we should have played the Jeopardy theme song. That would have been a good idea. Um, so it looks like it's pretty neck and neck, synchronous versus asynchronous learning. And some of the reasons you guys noted was flexibility, accountability, real life time. That's great. Yes, engaging students when things may be unclear is really, yeah, really essential. Great job. So we're kind of moving into the next sort of mini section of this presentation, which will be communication, which we think is essential, especially when you're moving onto an online teaching environment. So the purpose of communicating is to give information to get information, to gain an understanding, and to build relationships. So those are the reasons why we kind of communicate. Communicating with students in an online environment requires a little bit more thought and planning than communicating with students into a face-to-face environment. And as someone mentioned earlier, the absence of body language in an online environment is the reason for that. You don't have a sense of if your communication is being received the way you want it to be, because no one's shaking their heads, no one's smiling at you, that sort of thing. Or they might be, you just don't know it because you're just little icons on my screen. The awareness of limitations to communication capabilities with online environments will help you determine how to develop timely and relevant communications and how to effectively communicate with your online students. To determine what would be considered timely and relevant communication in your online class, you first need to decide why and what you need to communicate to students. So we'll talk about some communication guidelines that we think would be helpful for you going online. So crafting a timely, relevant, and useful communication to your online students is not always a simple task, but hopefully these guidelines can help you write a communication that will be timely, relevant, and useful to your students. So the first one is to remember that less is more. When you are composing the message you want to be sending to your online students, try to use as few words as possible while ensuring that your intended message is communicated with your choice of words. Online students, like all of us, are bombarded with communications that consist mostly of text. So the last thing they want is to read a lengthy online message from their TA. Your students are more likely to read and get the message from a clear, concise, well-crafted communication. So not only should your message to the student be concise, but it also needs to be clear and leave no room for confusion on the student's part. For example, if you want to let your students know that the deadline for the test has been extended, the message that you want to write to them should only talk about the extended deadline for the test. You need to make it clear by giving them all the details they need to know about the deadline extension, and not like talking about, say, the term paper that's due in 2 weeks or something like that. Another component of communication online is to be polite. Reread your communication to make sure it sounds the way you intend it to sound. You know, check the tone. I'll put those in air quotations, of your communication. Check for clarity and completeness of your message. Sometimes, you know, tone is lost through text and emails and messages. So just try to, you know, reread it a few times, make sure it's what you want to say, how you want to say it in a professional manner. But also invite your students to ask questions about your message if they don't understand it. You want your messages to be professional, and to let the students know that you welcome their questions. So, you know, like you can end it on a way to say, like, if you need more clarification, please email me. Like, I'm happy to clear things up if needed. I think I mentioned already, but it's worth mentioning again, to provide timely feedback and communication. Because your online students are learning from a distance, it's important that they receive timely and consistent communications regarding their process in the class. If a student asks you a question regarding an assignment, you should first provide that student with a personal response to the question. And then if you feel that the question is important for the rest of the class, you should address the question by sending out a class notice or something like that. You can say that, you know, this has been brought to my attention, that maybe this isn't as clear as it needs to be, so this is a follow-up communication that will clarify it. The other idea with communication is to hold virtual office hours. This gets back to the idea of building relationships, building rapport, being consistent in when you're available to communicate with people. It gives them a smiling face. You can turn on your camera, you can be there, you can kind of start to build those relationships. Like I said, relationships is about building, or communication is about building relationships and rapport, and hopefully that will keep your students engaged. So our next tangible tip is to use the Brightspace announcement tool at a specific time and day so that students know when to look at it. So say, you know, you can tell your students at the start of class, okay, I'm going to hold virtual office hours every Tuesday from 2 to 3 p.m. and at 2 p.m. I will send out all your class notices. So then they know when to expect communication from you. The second part of that communication deals with reminding your students to turn on their notification settings in Brightspace. So that will push their messages to the emails, because, you know, they may not be checking the Brightspace every day, but maybe they need to have, maybe you need to communicate with them urgently. So that will just push the message to their email. We do that. That's one of the first things we say to our students in the human sexuality course is, you know, and we actually take time in the class to say, this is how you turn on your notification. Which leads me into the next tangible tip, which is to create a short start here video. So maybe you create a video on your laptop of just you, 1 or 2 minute video, it doesn't have to be long, that tells the students where to find the course syllabus, how to navigate the Brightspace site, or other useful information like how to turn on notifications to receive it through their email, things like that. And not only are you providing the students with useful information, but again, if you're doing it through a video, you can insert your personality and start building relationships and that rapport with the students again. So I've been talking a lot about, building relationships and rapport as part of the communication things. So I thought I'd ask a question to you guys. So I'll give you a few more minutes to type into the chat. So how would you go about making communication in an online course personal? What are some of the things that you would do to accomplish that and to build rapport? Showing pictures of pets is a great idea. I don't have any pets myself, but I do have a teddy bear. Oh, that's a great tip. Signing your comments with your name and email so they know that it's coming from a real person. Trying to use first names, yes, that's great too. It makes me think, like, instead of like a blanket email, I like to make like, you can still have a blanket email, but take the first couple of sentences and make it personal. So instead of just saying good morning all, you can it might take a little extra time, but maybe you send out good morning Sarah. I guess that depends on the size of your class too. Include a fun fact about yourself at the start of each lecture and invite students to upload facts about themselves on discussion board. That's a great idea. Oh, I like that one. A virtual tour of your room or office space can build an extra level of emotional connection with your audience. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, I should have done that, but maybe later. Oh, mail merges for written communication to students. Yeah, I've only done that once, but that's a great idea. Yeah, safe space where people feel like they won't be mocked or bullied. Yeah, these are some great ideas. So we do have some suggestions in addition to all of these great ones that you guys have been typing away for me. So make it personal. So I think you guys sort of talked about some of these things. Share a fun fact. So I like bubble tea. Every time I go to someplace different, I have to look for bubble tea. So this is me drinking my bubble tea on my vacation once. So that was a way for me to personalize my communication. Other ways, using students' names, somebody said that. Maybe audio messages. Maybe you can give feedback uh, by recording your thoughts and sending it as an audio file instead of a written. I mean, some people might actually find that um, more productive on your end too as a TA. So instead of typing everything out, you're just verbally saying it. Maybe that will be quicker and faster for you. I know I'm a slow typer. Um, Personalizing your communications will help you connect with and build positive relationships with your online students. The students in your online classes want to feel connected to you, but also to their classmates too. And that's why I like the suggestion of someone had that, and sorry, I forget who it was, but providing a fun fact about you, but also allowing the students to provide fun facts about themselves too. And for these reasons, that's why you should make your communication as personal as you can, and why you should encourage your students to make their communication with each other personal. So making your communication personal does not mean that you have to ignore good etiquette or professional guidelines, or that you need to get to judge students' personal feelings. Making communications with your students personal means that you should communicate with your students in such a way that that you feel that they know that they're talking to a real person, and that you respect them and that you value your communication time with them. So the other idea is to maybe, like if you hold virtual office hours, or even if you're doing a tutorial or something, if you have connections with them, maybe add in a little time before or after each of your online teachings just to chat and to get to know them. I mean, even just through the chat box here, typing like good morning before everyone arrives, that gives the people who there early, some time to chat and get to know each other. Thank you all for those great suggestions. Um, the other part of communication as a TA that we wanted to talk to you about um, is communication with your faculty member too. Um, so it is important, especially when going online for the first time, to have good communication with your faculty supervisor. Such communications will help you understand their own struggles in switching to an online course, because some faculty may not have done online courses too, and they might be as anxious and as stressed as you are teaching online for the first time. So some of the things that we thought we would mention to you in helping you with communications with your faculty member is to ensure you keep consistent contact with them. Check in on a regular basis. Don't be shy to ask your questions and clarify your role in the course. Especially now, I mean, maybe you've done this course before, but now it's going to be offered online for the first time. So maybe your role is not what it going to has previously been. So maybe there is new things you need to talk about with that faculty member. So seek their guidance, ask for feedback, clarify what your primary goals and tasks should be with your instructor. And finally, remember to be conscious of your work schedule and your hours. Most TAs are contracted for a limited number of hours, and just be mindful now that you're moving online. Some of the things that might take an hour to do might take a little bit more time. So be aware of that, and let your instructor know if you're going over your allotted time, and seek to troubleshoot with them and find ways that you can address those time considerations while still doing what you need to do. So the other thing that TAs do, like one of the main duties of many TAs, is marking. Evaluating and providing feedback can be different online. So one of the best primers to help your students receive your feedback online is telling them what to expect and when to expect it. So we talked a little bit about this before, about timely and consistent feedback. Maybe you can give them feedback within 24 hours, but that may not always be possible. And if not, that's fine. Maybe you have a huge class. Be open and honest with your students on when they can expect their feedback and also where they can expect it. I know one of the things that we run into difficulties with using like Brightspace and Top Hat in our course is that sometimes the students don't know where to look for feedback. Sometimes they're looking in Brightspace when they need to be looking in Top Hat or vice versa. So especially if you're using different learning platforms like that, you want to make sure your students are aware of where they can find their feedback. Clarify the type of feedback you will be giving so students have a clearer sense of what to expect from you. Make it frequent, immediate, balanced, and specific. Be sure to give your students specific insights into how their work was graded, how it was evaluated. Vague comments do not provide the learner with enough information to be able to take action to improve their performance. Once your students have feedback, think about what's next for them. In some cases, students begin applying your thoughts immediately. In other cases, students just read what you. So ending feedback with a question can help students internalize and apply their feedback. So, the goal of your feedback is not just to justify why you gave them the grade. It's also so that they can improve and incorporate your feedback into their learning. So ending your feedback with a question can help them think about how to do that. Studies show that feedback that includes prompts or questions for further thought and explanation or clarification is the most helpful type of feedback. You can also ask for feedback on your feedback too. So you can say you're, a quarter of the way into class, you can just, send out an email saying, how is your feedback? Or is it, helpful? Is there anything I can do to make your feedback better? And another thing for online courses is to encourage peer feedback. Feedback doesn't always have to come from you as a TA or the instructor. A great way to give feedback while promoting increased interaction and engagement in online classes is by encouraging peer reviews. Peer feedback refers to when students review each other's work and provide meaningful feedback. You can kind of step back a little bit and moderate the exercise by letting students indulge in a group discussion. You do have to be involved in that so that, as someone said, you want to create a safe space in your online space too. So you do have to maybe set ground rules for how you encourage peer feedback. What kind of things can the students give feedback on and how should it be phrased. There might be a little bit of upfront preparation for providing online peer feedback, but it is a good way to kind of get people talking about each other's learning. And again, make your feedback personal. So as someone said earlier, use their names. I always like the hamburger idea. Do you guys know that? So 1 or 2 sentences at the start about what I really liked. Sort of like Phillip with the constructive, this could be improved thing, and then again end it on you did really well with this part. So it's like the bun and the hamburger is your what they could improve on, and the bun is what they've done great on. I always like that idea for providing feedback myself. Okay, so some more tangible tips for you. One thing is, remember that you may need more time for yourself as a TA to learn. I mean, maybe you don't use Brightspace that much. Maybe the instructor decided to use Top Hat, or maybe you've never been in, like, I'll be honest with you, this is like my third time in Collaborate. So I don't really know Collaborate that much. I think you can use pencils to draw on things, and like there are some pretty cool features in here, but it might take you time to learn all of the features of a program, and then knowing the features can actually help you be more effective as a TA. So just be aware that you might need some learning time yourself, and you might come into a lot of new student concerns that you haven't had to deal with before, and that can always be a surprise and a learning experience for you too. So just remember to sort of, I guess what I'm saying is to plan ahead and maybe keep that in the back of your mind. And relating to that is, remember to be kind to yourself as a TA. You don't need to be perfect. So I think Jill and I, when we were talking about the, when we were preparing for this, I forget the story I told, but anyways, I was saying how, there was one word I always messed up on, or it always made me think of something. And, if I do that, then that's okay. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then relating to that, like, reach out for help if you need it. Hopefully, there are a lot of resources on campus that can help you as a TA too. So it's just not, faculty that get support and then students that get support. You as a TA, there are supports on campus for you too. So remember that and reach out if you need it. We all make mistakes. Don't get hung up on them. I think it was in Brightspace I released grades once without finalizing them, which means that the 500 students all got a final grade of 0 pushed to their emails, which didn't really take the students that long to write back to me and ask why they received a 0 for the course. Boy, did I feel stupid. But, I swear it wasn't 2 minutes after I did that I was aware of my mistake. But, it was a mistake. I just had to say, oops, sorry. And then I corrected it, and they all got their final grades calculated correctly. So just remember those things, mistakes happen. And most people are understanding. No one got too upset once the mistake was corrected with the grade part anyways. So that's kind of my last tangible tip. And in summary, I just kind of want to say it's good to think about the type of learning in your class, like we talked about, asynchronous to synchronous, and how it will impact the way you do your work as a TA. Remember to reach out for help if needed, especially if you're transitioning to an online course for the first time. Be yourself, make yourself personable, like try to build those relationships with the students, because you'll have a better experience and they will have a better experience, and everyone will like it much better. Be flexible and compassionate. It's worth saying that, at this time, a lot of people are feeling anxiety, um, not just about school, but life in general and what's going on. And sometimes it's more important to be compassionate and flexible than to adhere to like strict deadlines and things like that. So I did want to leave some time. I know for questions or comments, if you guys want to continue discussing some things, that would be awesome. So I'll just give you a couple minutes if anyone wants to type in a few things, or if you had another suggestion, Jill, maybe if you want to raise your hand or something, I don't know. That would be great.
We will certainly be here until 2 p.m. to answer any questions, both in the chat or speak to you directly. And I also want to let you know that both Phillip and myself are available to help you one-on-one. And the Center for Learning and Teaching is always here to support TAs and markers and graduate students in transitioning their teaching to online. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We have lots of resources, webinars. We have our focus blog that on our website. We also have the certificate in university teaching and learning that can also support you in developing those teaching skills. Thank you so much again, Phillip, for being here. And thank you to our over 80 participants for being here and being engaged and helping us model and show what Collaborate can do so that you can also use that in your TA work coming up in the future. So we'll be here for another 5 minutes if you would like to stay in chat. And yes, Tammy, we are working to make sure that we get students and external participants a copy of this recording as well as slides. Please be a little patient. We're still trying to work out how we can make sure everyone has access to that. So thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to you in our other webinars and sessions.
I was going to volunteer you, Jill, but I was like, oh wait. Everyone send their email to Jill.
Feel free to always email me. And Kayla, this is a really great question. So yes, any of our online webinars offered through the Center for Learning and Teaching, as well as if you're attending other online webinars related to teaching and learning, those certainly can count towards your professional development credits for the certificate. I always recommend just saving a copy of your registration confirmation and then including that in your final submission of the certificate package. If it's something offered through the Center for Learning and Teaching, we do keep a record of everyone who has enrolled and attended. So we can always make sure that we can collect that information once we kind of go back to our regular face-to-face workings at the office. Yes, so we're hopefully going to send out that link. We have to figure out how we're going to do that and if it can be accessible. We're still trying to work out some of the accessible features for external participants. So once we figure that out, we will be emailing the participants and letting them know how they can access this content online. Oh, really great question. How do we write empathetic emails? Ooh,
Oh, that is a good question.
that is a good question. I think being authentic and genuine in your communications, I think being kind and approaching not just thinking about the syntax and grammar, but how you're actually thinking and feeling towards the student is really important because once you do that, that does come in through your emails. I think sometimes emails might not be the best form of communication, and maybe offering to meet with a student online via Collaborate or Teams or another online tool where you can see the student face to face might be best when you're thinking about dealing with very difficult topics and communicating with students. So I would always suggest with difficult conversations like that, suggest an online face-to-face meeting. Oh,
I
really
also
great
use.
question, Kayla. Yes. Sorry, Phillip.
No, go. I was just going to say I use smiley faces a lot in my emails. That may not be professional for some people, but um, just to try to show more emotion. You know.
I think Kathy. is a really
Yeah.
great point. Don't be suspicious or assume the worst from students. We hear a lot of this conversation around academic integrity and really thinking about students are out to cheat or out to gain something over you, but really approaching that students have the best intentions and then thinking that at first, how you approach your communications is really important because students are also in a difficult time when they're transitioning their learning to a different environment and juggling multiple things, and everyone having to social distance also puts a lot of pressure. So being conscious of that and assuming that the best intentions are what your students have in mind is really important.
It's hard not to fall into that trap sometimes, but I think it's worthwhile not to.
That's really great advice. I think that's really important. And Lisa, yes, Jennifer Stamp, there's a great article in Dal News that talks about how Jennifer Stamp used students creating memes as a way to have that conversation around academic integrity, which is a really great, fun and creative opportunity for students to engage in a topic that sometimes might be a bit dry or really difficult to have those conversations with. So I see that we're almost at 2. Thank you, everybody, and thank you again, Phillip. And we look forward to engaging you in more of our webinars and seeing you online. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thanks, everyone.